My name is Pacha. I'm an independent US researcher. Before that, I had been working in cybersecurity for about 9 years. Cybersecurity is cool, definitely, but it is also a highly specialized and complex domain. In my early years of working as a cybersecurity US researcher, I suffered a lot because I found out traditional US research methods usually won't work in this domain. That's why today I'm going to tell you why doing US research for complex applications and expert users need a new way to do research. Let's first take a look at some examples of what complex applications will look like. For example, air traffic control system, airplane autopilot system, or military system, and cybersecurity system. Do you notice what these complex applications have in common? First, they all need to handle with a large underlying datasets. Second, their workflow involves making high-impact decisions. Third, to make decisions, they need to collaborate among large toolsets and multiple roles. The users of complex applications are experts who have highly specialized skills and in-depth domain knowledge. So, that's why I want to tell you why it is valuable to do research for expert users and why this matters. Let's take a look at some facts in cybersecurity. On average, a company will receive around 10,000 alerts per day, with only 2 to 5 cybersecurity experts to handle all of these alerts. When cybersecurity experts handle these alerts, they need to collaborate among 130 more tools to help them identify suspicious activities. As a result, on average, a company could lose about 25 billion US dollars due to a cyber attack. Sounds amazing, right? Although in cybersecurity, the consequence is often related to business loss. But for the other kinds of complex applications, it's often related to human safety. So we must know that expert users need better user experience to support critical decisions. They are hard to understand. That's why we need research. However, doing US research for complex applications is way more challenging than you can think. Even today, after a decade working as a cybersecurity US researcher, I still feel it is so challenging to conduct research in this field. I'm gonna tell you why it is and what should we do with it. Remember, we mentioned the commonality among complex applications, right? That's where the challenges come from. I walk through one by one. Challenge 1. Usability equals information triage. For complex applications, expert users refer to a large underlying datasets to have a comprehensive understanding of the current situation before they make any critical decisions. Therefore, their interactions are mostly centered on manipulating information from disparate systems. Expert users manipulate data to help them identify valuable information, to help them make sense of the data, and help them make critical decisions. That's where I learned that for complex applications, usability often equals an easier and efficient way for expert users manipulate data to make high-quality decisions. Challenge 2. Testing markup is useless because the interactions are all centered on manipulating information. So today, if you only test your design through markup or prototypes, then you are testing it wrong because markup lacks realistic data for expert users to achieve sense-making. Eventually, it turns out your users will only point out those unreasonable parts of your data which distract your research. Think about an example of how we usually tell our participants during a usability study. We often ask them, "Today, I'm going to show you a mock-up or prototype for you to explore our design. But please remember, this is only a prototype, so the data might not be realistic. I want you to focus more on the concept itself as well as the presentation of the data. This might work in general apps, but for complex applications, I guarantee this won't work." The problem with this approach is it doesn't match experts' mental model. Expert users evaluate your design through the combination of the data value and the presentation of data. Without the realistic data, you create additional breakpoints in expert users' information-seeking process. So the lesson 1 here is we need to know that expert users need realistic data to understand your design and to evaluate the effectiveness of your design. So, what should we do to overcome the challenges presented by the large underlying data sets? The first advice I'm going to give you is to use real fake data. In cybersecurity, we often simulate a real attack, then convert it into a prototype. That means you as researchers, you need to start working with the engineering team and domain experts to come out with realistic data in your markup. Challenge 3. Information triage is accomplished by the handoff among multiple roles and tools. Think about the example of emergency care. When you go to the emergency care, usually you will encounter several roles and tools. That's where you can imagine what the handoff process is. So does in cybersecurity. In cybersecurity, we will have Tier 1 security analysts to filter out those false alarms and to identify the real attack or suspicious activities. Once Tier 1 security analysts identify suspicious event, they need to summarize their findings and pass all the useful information and ask to a Tier 2 security analyst. As for Tier 2 security analysts, they need to quickly make sense of the current situation and start their investigation as soon as possible. Here's more details about the process. Here's an example of a flow model we created for Tier 1 security analysts from previous research. Only for Tier 1 security analysts to identify suspicious activities requires them collaborate among more than 10 different roles and different tool sets. So that's the complexity in the handoff process. So the lesson here is the variation of the handoff process about how information triage happens across multiple roles and tools are hard to comprehend all of them. To overcome the complexity of the handoff process in information triage, here's a technique you can use, which is work model analysis. Doing research for complex applications, oftentimes you will be overwhelmed by the complexity and get lost in your research. So that's very important for you to maintain a macro view of the entire process to help you keep on track. Work model analysis is to provide you a macro view of the entire process. So remember, before diving into any details, start from understanding how users delegate their decision making. We usually start our interviews from the supervisors or managers to understand the delegation process instead of interview a real user at the very beginning of our research. During this process, you need to pay attention to those institutional hints such as team politics or conventions in the organizations. Let me give you an example. In cybersecurity, IT team and security teams, they supposedly need to work together seamlessly in order to protect their company. But in reality, these two teams, they hate each other. So we often observed that IT team always want to bypass security teams to make their work more efficient, and vice versa. That's how team politics can cause a different decision-making and behaviors in an organization. Next, you need to change your perspectives to comprehend the understanding of the handoff process. So first, you need to zoom in to individual roles, particularly focus on how information flows among different roles, how individuals make decisions, what's the level of knowledge individuals have. And to be as comprehensive as you can, you may need a longer period of observation of their daily work. Since in complex applications, expert users usually have a broad task need to finish, and also their goals are usually unstructured. Go back to our previous example of the flow model for Tier 1 security analysts. To come up with this flow model, it actually took us at least 1 week to observe multiple Tier 1 security analysts. But even though I don't think we comprehend all the variation they could have during their work, then zoom out your perspective and shift your focus to understand the handoff process among different roles, particularly on how individual roles summarize their findings and transfer the knowledge to the next person. This step could give you insight about not only how individual roles evaluate the current situation and explicit their findings to the next person, but also about how individual roles pick up prior knowledge from the other person and quickly make sense of the current situation. We must know, for complex applications, mostly you will need to support multiple roles job to be done. So it's very important for you to have a macro view of the entire process. And work model analysis is like building a world map for you to lay it out as a foundation for your next step. Without this, you might get lost in your research and be overwhelmed by the complexity. Challenge 4. General interview is an inadequate way to do research. Think about how we traditionally ask questions in an interview. We often ask participants to tell us about when was the last time they used something. By asking like this, it can only help us understand the daily use case and routines. But for complex applications, the workflow of expert users are often non-linear and variable. There's no such a happy path. Every day is different. Every day is case by case. And also, let's not forget about expert users are trained to mitigate the risk and respond to incidents. So does your design. Your design is supposedly to support users to handle incident well. So only study about daily works would lose many critical details of how experts handle the incidents. Let's take Captain Sully's example. From the first beginning, the Captain Sully noticed there's something wrong for his plane till he successfully landed on Hudson River. It only took him about 3 minutes and 29 seconds. So the first lesson we learned from this is decision making is under time pressure. Only the time pressure already cause or create different contexts of use. Second, general interview cannot help us elicit details of experts' cognition process. You may end up hearing a vivid incident story, but when it comes to understanding how expert users consume different sources of information and make such decisions, general interviews can only give you general insights. So we need to understand decision making is a complex process with lots of cognition details. that require us use different way to do research. The last technique for you to overcome a challenge is to change your general interview to instant-based interview by applying critical detection methods. Instant-based interview is a technique for you to elicit experts' cognition process when making decisions. And there are 4 steps for you to conduct a successful incident-based interview. First, you need to start asking general questions to understand their routines or daily works, because those routines or daily works don't contain enough cognitive components for making critical decisions. Instead, you should ask your questions like this. Tell us about when was the last time you feel your skills were challenged. By asking like this, most likely, those expert users will tell you about a recent or an impressive incident they've been in charge for. And by doing so, you start collecting a brief account of the incident. Step 2. After the users tell you a brief account of the incident, now it's time for you to work with participants to construct an incident timeline. In this process, you need to highlight 2 types of event in the timeline. First, you need to identify where's the beginning and the end of the incident. Second, you need to identify the critical decision point. To identify the beginning and the end of the story, you can ask questions like this. What happens right before you notice there's something wrong? Or, what did the things eventually turn out? As for identifying critical decision points, it usually comes from either you notice there are some action taken that affect the whole event. For example, Captain Sully starts trying to recover the engine after he noticed there's something wrong in his engine. Or, Tier 2 security analysts want to collect more logs to investigate further. Or, the critical decision point can be identified through when you notice there's a major shift in experts' understanding of the current situation. For example, Captain Sully realized that he only left one option, is to land his plane on Hudson River. Or, for our security analysts, they finally realized they are under attack. This process could give you insights about the transition of experts' cognition along with the development of the incidents. Also, by doing so, sometimes you will help expert users to recall or refine the incident details. Step 3. Progressively deepening. As you've laid out a good foundation for your incident-based interview, next, you need to get deeper on each critical decision point to elicit the cognition process of expert users. Specifically, look for 4 major cognitive components in the interview. First, perception. How do the expert users perceive the current situation? What information is useful for expert users to evaluate the current situation? What are information can be the clues for expert users to identify? Second, comprehension. How do expert users assess the current situation? How do they make judgment for the current situation? Third, projection. How do expert users define their action plans? What are the options they have? How do they prioritize those options? Last, decisions. What's their final decision? How do they come up with this decision? After the first 3 steps, you should already get lots of great details of the instance. Now, the last step is to give you a little bit more magic to help your insight get to next level, which is asking what-if questions. Here's a scenario that I encountered before. During my interview, I often ask cybersecurity experts, how do you arrive at this conclusion? How do you know this is something bad that need to take care? And the common feedback they give me is, I just know it. It just looks so weird. I evaluate this based on my past experience. period. So I suffered from eliciting more details about how they make such judgment and decision until I found what if questions are really helpful to help you unwrap their past experience and gaining new insights from previous steps. There are two types of what if questions you could use. First, as per novice contrast. This is to ask questions like this. What if today is a junior person in charge at this particular point? What might be different? Will they come out with the same conclusion as you? What might they miss it? By asking this, it's helpful for your products, especially when you need to support less experienced users. For example, in cybersecurity, we often as a practice called guided investigation because there are some less experienced users. They need some support to help them conduct investigation as efficient as those expert users. That's where the what if questions could help. The second type of what if question is ask about hypothetical situation. For example, you can ask the users about what if today a key feature or a key information is different. What might it impact on your decision, assessment, judgment, or actions? This is particularly useful for you to understand the dynamics of experts' sense-making process. Today, we've talked about how expert users are different from general users, and we know that doing research for expert users and complex applications needs different ways to do research. And here are 3 techniques we talked about you can use. First, remember to use realistic data in your mockup to help expert users understand your design and evaluate your design. Second, conduct work model analysis before you dive into any details. Otherwise, you might be overwhelmed by the complexity and get lost in your research. Third, change your general interview to instant-based interview to help you elicit more details of the expert's cognition process. As technologies evolves, the problems we are solving are more and more complex than before. You may eventually get involved in dealing with complex applications in any kind of format. That's why you should care, and that's why you need to know that. Expert users and complex applications need new ways to do research. Thanks for listening.